All right, going live. I'm gonna put me in on here. We're gonna wait a little bit for folks to get here. Hey, how's it going? I'm Sam Tenez. I am going to be hosting today. I'm so stoked that Spin has allowed us to do this here. It's going to be so awesome. Big shout out to Daniel. Yeah, I'm Sam Tenez. I am an alternative artist and songwriter from Nashville, Tennessee. I do mostly, I've worked a bunch with Ruel, who is kind of used on a ton of TV and film things, like movie trailers and TV shows. But I also worked with banners, and I have a feature on the new Kygo record called Don't Give Up on Love. So that's pretty fun. And I was a writer at first, and then I kind of transitioned into being an artist. And with my artistry, I kind of found a couple songs that have gone viral, one being Play with Fire, that's gotten almost 100 million streams. So I'm really stoked to be here doing this. I just want to give you a little background so you know who I am. But today I'm doing Battle Talks Live with Brandon Boyd. And what Battle Talks is, it's a series I started kind of based on my EP that's out called Warplanes EP. And it's basically about how every great artist, behind every great artist is a battle story. So that is the background on that. And Brandon just joined. Awesome. Well, I'm going to give a little bit of a shout out to Brandon and give you guys some info on that. Brandon is the lead singer of Grammy-nominated band Incubus, as you guys probably already know. But what you probably don't know is that they have sold 23 million records, and they've had huge hits with like Drive and Pardon Me and all sorts of songs. Wish You Were Here, that's another one I love. And they pretty much accomplish everything that a band dreams of accomplishing. Huge arena tours, been on late night TV shows. The guy is a legend. Honestly, when I was in high school, I actually had a band, and we were basically trying to be Incubus. So this is pretty exciting for me too. I'm a huge fan of music. There is no mystery there. So I'm stoked. I'm gonna ask Brandon to join on here soon. So whenever you're ready, Brandon, you hop on here and let me know, request to join, and I'll add you. Yeah, I know. It's kind of wild being on here on Spin Magazine, huh? It's different. But I love it. It's really cool they let us do this. So this is just kind of giving more of a platform for what we're doing. It's so awesome. I'm looking on here. Okay, there we go. There's Brandon. I'm going to go live with Brandon. Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's like 10 o'clock where you are, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been
Awesome.
up since the butt crack of dawn, but it's still morning. Where are you?
Yeah, are you an early riser? I'm in Nashville,
I
Tennessee.
Oh, nice. I am actually. I usually wake up with the sun, and I have a lot of help with that by my elderly French bulldog, Bruce. He wakes up before the sun, so he's my little
That's
alarm clock.
amazing. Yeah, pets are the best at that. They wake up at like butt crack of dawn for sure.
Yeah, they're on a whole different
Uh,
like cycle, so I just follow him.
that's awesome. Well, man, I've been a big fan of your work, so I'm excited to get to talk about some things, some of your music. You might have heard some of the intro, but basically what I do with these is I kind of go through and I talk about, people's battle story. And for me, that's just like all the struggle and the craziness you've been through to get to where you're at.
Mm,
Um, when I was first looking at it seems like you guys have had a crazy long journey in the beginning, even from
yeah.
1991 to 1996, when you actually had a span of signing to Sony. Like, what were those early years like? Like, was that cutting your teeth? Were y'all in van and trailer, or like just driving your cars and just like staying in the same
Yep.
hotel room when you're touring and that kind of crap? Or like,
Yeah, we did the full get in the van uh, thing. That was kind of almost like the ethos from the time we were young. I think we kind of knew that we had a long way to go as far as our songwriting was concerned, but the part that was the most fun and still kind of is the most fun was just playing live, was just being in
Yeah.
front of people, even if it was, four people at some random bar somewhere. Uh, so we did that. We did that kind of ad nauseum for, quite a few years before we even got into a tour bus. And then once we got into a tour bus, we were able to sleep a little bit more. I think
Yeah.
it sounds like you kind of know the drill as well. But
Oh,
there,
yeah.
riding around and then driving ourselves around the country in a 15 passenger van with a trailer attached to it. Um, I have I have mixed memories about it. I suppose mixed feelings in the memories about it. It was super fun,
Yeah.
super chaotic, and
Yeah.
really hard. Like really, really hard.
Go
Where
for it.
you start to understand why most bands don't make it past that point because it's like it's grueling and you
Yeah.
don't get sleep and you have to like rock paper scissors for who gets the bed in the hotel room, and sometimes three of you can fit in the bed and you learn to snuggle with your best pal, you know what I mean? Like you just, yeah. So
Yeah, we all miss snuggling right now, that's for sure.
oh my god, so much.
So when you first signed it in 96, like what did you feel like, oh my God, we made it, like this is the moment, or did you realize, whoa, we have a whole lot of ways to go?
There was a sense of excitement about getting signed.
Yeah.
We actually knowingly turned down some like bigger record deals that were
Wow.
offered to us, um, and sought out a smaller label in what was then Immortal Records.
Yeah.
And so it was much less money, but it was a better deal for us in the long run. It was a little bit more like a development deal. So it basically had money in the budget for us to stay on tour.
That's amazing.
And we knew that the more we played, we would be kind of honing that skill, which was so important to us. But then we would also be just by sheer numbers, by playing enough, we would eventually become like a better band. We felt like that was
Yeah.
an inevitability. So no, we didn't feel like we had like made it when we got signed. I think that I know that my understanding and my realization at that point when we actually signed the record deal was like now the real work starts.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of young musicians can get kind of swept up in the excitement of merely getting signed, and because getting signed is it's a difficult uh, thing to do, to get some
Yeah.
strange financial entity to believe in you enough that they're going to throw money at you and cross their fingers and hope that things go well. But
Yeah.
then after that, that's truly when the real work begins. So
Yeah.
we've
Absolutely.
always been down for the work part.
Man, well, I'll skip around a little bit too, so you'll have to forgive me in that. But like, Science was a huge record for me personally. I remember hearing that record and feeling like nothing else sounded like it at the time. It was just like
Thank you.
all on its own. It was almost like from another world. Like what was the biggest influences for that? Were you influenced by grunge and hip hop, or like what was kind of happening to like bring those sounds out?
We were still very much kind of cycling through our biggest influences at that point in time,
Yeah.
as many young bands do, if not all young bands do. You even said it in your intro. It's like when
Yeah.
we first start playing music on our own, we're most of the time we're kind of just emulating or imitating our most cherished bands. So
Yeah.
for us, that was like Primus and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the
Yeah.
Beastie Boys and Pearl Jam and Rage Against the Machine and
Yes.
Soundgarden. You know what I mean? Like we had this huge uh, list of bands that we couldn't even put one of them first. It was just like we loved all of this music, and we were really blessed to be the age that we were in the time that we were when we started our band, because it was really like this. It was like a renaissance
Yeah.
in music. It was hip hop was flourishing, rock music was flourishing in the form of grunge and
Yeah.
other kind of subgenres, and hardcore music was flourishing. There's so much. It was just like it was like a rainbow of influences, and we weren't picky. we just were like, this is all amazing. We want to be in a band too. So
Yeah.
we just kind of that. And so Science was a result of us still very much sort of sifting through all those influences. And it really took until we started writing the album after that, which became Make Yourself, that we really started to naturally kind of filter those influences, and not, we were actively trying not to sound like anybody, but we were honoring, and that's how you truly honor an influence, is by speaking it aloud, like we are referencing this, but we're running it through this kind of vast filter of our young life experience. And that's how we started to develop our own sound, I think.
That's cool. That's super cool. Yeah, I kind of can't believe they didn't pull a single from that record. Like, was there no radio single from that record?
We did have a single from that record, but it was only sent around to college radio stations.
Okay, like AAA. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it was a song called A Certain Shade of Green.
Yes, okay, that's the one that I thought. I was like, why didn't they send that one? I'm like, that one's the one.
Yeah, they did. They just sent it
Okay.
to, it was in a much more limited play. And we got a little bit of play on college radio stations and did a lot of gigs around those kinds of things. And we made a music video too, and it's ridiculous, but it's awesome.
That's one I haven't seen. I've seen like the Pardon Me one and a bunch of others, but I need to go back and check that one out.
We have some like pre-budget music videos, like before we had money to spend, that are truly terrible, but in the best possible way.
That's crazy. That's so funny. Yeah, like when you have no money, but you want it to look super dope, so you just come up with the coolest ideas possible.
Sometimes a vast budget can be a hindrance, because if you don't have a good idea, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. And we've made those videos too.
That's amazing. I was looking at this too. I'm like, thinking about your voice, I'm like, no one else kind of sings like you. Like even from like the kind of like rappy stuff in Science to the more kind of sung out stuff and Make Yourself, like, where did you, like, what are your vocal influences? Like, who do you like love that are great singers to you?
That's a really good question. It has changed over the years. It started from a particular place when I knew that I wanted to be in a band. And when we started our band, I was very, very enamored of the way that people like Chris Cornell sang, and Mike Patton from Faith No More and Mr. Bungle was a big influence. But I was also really inspired by a pretty large handful of female singers too.
Yeah.
My voice is, it kind of rides this middle tone between what are classically male ranges, but then I can also drift into kind of what are more classically female ranges. So I've been unconsciously attracted to a lot of female voices over the years, and some of which are like Bjork and PJ Harvey, and among many, many others. But those were pretty massive influences on the way that I sing as well.
You're so experimental with your tones. It's almost like you have an instrument and you're just finding more and more unique ways as you went along and made these records to use your instrument. And I just always love that about you as a vocalist. So great.
Thank you. It's a funny thing, because I found myself in a band with these are guys that I grew up with since I was a kid. Jose and I have known each other since we were in 4th grade, and we met Mikey in middle school, and all of us became close friends around our love of skating and surfing and art. Yeah. So we were already kind of banded together. So it was a very natural progression for us to start playing music together. And I think that the way that my voice has evolved over the years is, in many ways, a reaction to my influences, like we were talking about. But in a lot of ways too, it was a reaction to the kind of prodigal, vast musicianship of the guys that I find myself in a band with. Michael and Ben and Jose and Chris, they're like crazy musicians. They're really wild technicians. And to a degree that I have a hard time even comprehending sometimes. So when I write music on my own with a guitar or on the piano or drums, it's like I can do it, but it's a lot more rudimentary, and I can get some cool stuff out of it. And I've done some solo records and things like that. But the musicianship is definitely on a lower level, and that's okay. But so what I mean is, with my voice, and as it responds to the way that we write music together as Incubus, is it's almost like I'm reacting to uh, an alien landing a ship in my backyard, and I walk down and try and have a conversation with them. So it forces me to
To,
rise to an occasion that I otherwise
yeah.
would not have risen to.
Yeah.
And on a good day, I really hope that the way that I interpret, Michael's guitar riffs with my melodies and lyrics, I hope that he's having a similar experience, and I
Yeah.
think sometimes he does, where it's like he's surprised by what I present. He's like, I would never have thought to do that. And it's not because I'm the brightest bulb in the chandelier. It's just that I'm a highly like adaptive person. I can
Yeah.
like, I can do the dance with him, which is fun.
Yeah. Well, I believe that. I believe that. When I was listening and kind of like researching before this whole interview, I noticed that like that something I didn't notice before, that you guys produced a good bit of the Make Yourself record by yourself. Is that true? Other than the
Yeah.
singles?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. We,
wild.
well, we even like produced those songs as well.
Yeah.
We've worked with some amazing producers over the years. We've been really lucky between Scott Litt, who did Make Yourself,
Yeah.
um, and Pieces of Morning View, to Brendan O'Brien, and Dave Sardi with our more recent album 8. These are all guys that were there. They're like at the top of the list for producing rock bands. We could
Yeah.
not have asked for better guys to work with. But we have always been a band
Yeah.
that's been very self-informed in that regard. We have very clear ideas of where we want things to go. So what's amazing about working with guys like those three that I just mentioned is that I think they come into the projects understanding that we are pretty we're fluid, and that we're open to all kinds of ideas, but that we're not just sort of like there to be told what to do. Like we're
Yeah.
actively involved in the process at every single step of the way.
Yeah.
That's what makes it fun.
That's cool.
I like your shirt, by the way, Deftones. Those are our boys.
Thank you. It's so funny. I actually had this shirt like way back in the day, and I just recently kind of bumped into it on eBay, and I was like, I've got to get this shirt again. Like I miss.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an old new stock tour shirt. So I was like, I've got to
Nice.
get it again. But
Nice.
yeah,
Those guys are great, man.
so good, so good. One other thing I was thinking about too is like, I've watched some interviews with Fantagram. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but like
Mm-hmm.
Fantagram and them working kind of with Ricky Reed on a song called You Don't Get Me High Anymore. And, one thing that they were saying is like they have this tight-knit group between Sarah and I can never remember the other main guy in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing somebody else in from the outside that started speaking into their art was a little hard, but they also had enough respect for him to let him kind of insert a few things. Is that kind of more the process that was happening for Pardon Me and a few other songs on Make Yourself?
Yeah, with the producer Scott of that
Yeah.
record, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some element of that. There was the way that he produced was interesting because it was different than
Josh.
other producers we've worked with, in that it was never like, don't do that, do this. That's not really how that's ever really worked with us. It's more like that moment right there. I really like that. That's really good. This is the best part of the song, and run with that.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit abstract, and so you're left to sort of interpret, what does he mean? Like, should we make this part twice as long? And then you see him in the corner, like,
Yeah.
scratching his chin, like, yeah, maybe.
Man,
And so it's a conversation of sorts.
I miss those type of producers. I feel like these days producers are a new role where they're building the track and they're mixing it and they're mastering it. And they have the vision for the thing, for, kind of what you kind of referenced in some other things as like, electronic music and, it's kind of less bandish. And I miss, a real band being in a room, someone kind of observing from the outside and kind of pulling the gold out. There's something magic about that for sure.
I agree. And I think that it's one of the reasons why, even though like rock and roll, the idea of a handful of people, each individually specialized at their instruments, getting into a room together
Yeah.
and making something, as it's out of favor right now. It is not
Yeah.
the music du jour, but it kind of comes in waves. And
Yeah.
it falls out of favor, and then it falls back in favor in a big way, and then it falls out of favor, and then it reinvents itself in some other way. And so it's been interesting to be in the same rock band for now almost 30 years and watch those cycles, watch what we do fall out of favor and then come back into style, and
Yeah.
then fall out of favor and go back into style. It kind of makes me think that the idea of rock and roll will never fully die off, even though it has like zombified periods where it's drifting on a life that it once had, and it's sort of like, cloudy eyed walking into the future somewhere. But
Yeah.
sometimes, bands emerge, new bands, and they reinvent it in a way that sounds completely new. And then sometimes bands that we have known about for some time come back with an album that's completely fresh, and it changes the conversation. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Billie Eilish has been one of those people who's kind of opened up the idea that pop music can be dark. It's like
yeah,
there was this whole thing of like it has to be shiny and perfect and whatever else. And Billie Eilish and her brother came in and were like, "Hey, we made this in our bedroom and it's super dark." And
yeah.
you I was
And
what were you saying?
I was just going to say that it's wild to see what becomes popular and what rises to
Mm,
the fore, and a lot of it has to do with the artist, in this case Billie Eilish and her brother.
yeah,
But so much of how it's received depends on the kind of the societal circumstances or the cultural circumstances that
yeah,
are ready to catch it and absorb it and accept it. So it's wild, because it's possible that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, Billie Eilish wouldn't have worked, and she could have like gone
crazy.
more obscure. But the way that the world has shifted and the way that it has, it like met her and her thing at this exact moment. And it's a really wild phenomenon to witness,
Yeah,
or God forbid, to be the band that meets the world at its moment at any particular time. There's a little bit of like synchronicity that's involved there. But anyway,
yeah,
go on.
absolutely. That was one thing I was going to ask you about, pardon me, on that Make Yourself record is like, it feels like it might have been a little bit of ahead of its time, because the more I read about it, the more it seems like you guys fought to make it a single, fought to get radio to really come onto it. And then fans were so overly over the top about how much they loved it that people couldn't deny it anymore. And they just started playing it all over radio. Is that how it felt to you?
Yeah, yeah. We put it out as a single, and it did better than anything we'd put out before, because our record label finally started like shopping it to like actual like rock stations and alternative rock stations and
Yeah.
things like that. So it started getting a little bit more, but it was nothing really to write home about. And our plan was to just stay on tour, so our shows kept getting bigger, and that was part of the thing that
Mm,
started to inform some of the radio stations, where I think that the thinking was there was a band that a lot of people are going to watch, so maybe we should listen to what they're doing. So they played it a little bit, but it wasn't until Mikey and I started to take that song in particular to radio stations physically. We would show up in the morning and to do like an interview, a morning interview on a local rock radio station while
yeah.
we were on tour, and then we would perform the song for them acoustic. And I think that by performing it acoustic, it kind of showed the song. We played it, as it exists, it just didn't have drums and
Yeah.
backing instruments. It was just a guitar and a vocal. But I think it showed those radio programmers what the song was at its core. Maybe there was more substance to it than they had been able to see in the album version. I don't know. But then at that point, the
Yeah.
album version started to get picked up, and it got played a lot, which is awesome.
I feel like there's something spiritual in a moment where you're with the two people performing the song and you're the audience and you get to experience that song in real life. It's different than just pressing play on a
Yeah.
CD or streaming it. So they probably were just feeling like just the power of the music that you guys were making. I mean, that's a cool story. I didn't know that you guys were doing like kind of a radio tour, and that's what kind of pushed it over the edge. That's cool.
Well, we were on tour properly. We were playing every night. We would show up in the mornings, sometimes at ungodly hours, and
Dang.
perform a couple of songs. So we were doing like we were doing multiples a day. And speaking of like
Dang.
battle stories, that was a period of time that was fun and exciting, but it was also really scary because I don't think any of us had ever experienced actual like fatigue like that, you know. Um,
Mm.
it's really a young man's game or a young person's game
Yeah,
because
it's true.
if they asked us to do the same thing, to do like 12 shows a week now, I'm like, no, that hurts too much. That hurts my body too much. But when you're, when you're 22, 23 years old, you're kind of like, oh, that's going to suck. Let's do it. You got all
Yeah.
this like spikes in you still.
That's so
Um,
true. That's so true.
but it was hard. It was really hard. Like there were periods of time where uh, you just, you're so underslept that, and the only place or time to take a nap is like under the drum riser with earplugs in. And so you go and you take a nap on the
So
floor on the
crazy.
stage, or that's the period of time where it's like you eat when you can, you sleep when you can, not because you're hungry right
Yeah.
now or because you're tired. It's like you just get those basic needs whenever you have a tiny little sliver of time, and
Yeah.
you steal them away to the best of your ability.
I was looking at too, like, Morning View was another record that was like, after Make Yourself, to have another record that was even bigger to me, like, it's crazy. I think you guys had 4 or 5 singles on the chart at some point with that record at the same time or
Mm.
something. And, like, what was your mindset when you're making it? I know as an artist, it's really hard to, like, if you have past success, to not try to just repeat what you did. Like,
Mm.
where did your headspace go to keep you from landing in this, like, it's not sophomore slump because there was other records that happened before it, but that sort of headspace of a sophomore slump of like, oh my gosh, here's my first huge commercial success. This next record better be good or we're gonna, did you have any of those fears, or did you just make art?
Some of those concerns were expressed by a couple of the guys in the band here and there during the process of making both Make Yourself and Morning View and successive records after that. Um, I can only tell you what my experience was in amongst those things. I had almost an ethos of sorts that helped to uh, enrich the challenge
Mm.
of creating original work, and also take some of the pressure off of myself. And really the ethos is you're not allowed to repeat yourself.
Mm.
So that makes it harder.
Yeah.
Um, but there's something kind of liberating about that too, because you've drawn yourself a boundary of sorts
Mm.
where, when we talk about art and boundaries aren't words that are like synonymous. In fact, they're almost diametrically opposed
Yeah.
from a certain point of view. But when you draw yourself a boundary that's pretty clearly defined, and it's something as simple as don't do the same thing that you did before,
Mm.
um, consciously at least, because we all have creative patterns, and we're going to repeat certain things, whether it's the cadence of our voice or the style of delivery, things like that. We don't
Yeah.
have as much control over, so we'll let go of that. But in terms of like Drive was a big hit, let's get another one of those, which we heard that a lot from
Yeah.
management and record label
Yeah.
and people who are experts and things like that. But our collective reaction to that was, that would be lame. There's nothing cool about, like, that's awesome that that song is doing so well,
Yeah.
but that would be a real cop out for us, both creatively and personally and intellectually, to
Yeah.
merely copy our own formula. And so we decided, like, we don't do that. And even if it means that that was our biggest moment and we were already past it,
Yeah.
so be it. So we were much more, I suppose, adventurous in our creative ethos as a band, and we still continue to be. And the thing is we probably have left a lot of potential like success on the table for having that
Mm.
kind of stubborn ethos. But um, the flip side of it, or that the result of that, is that we still are a very active, very enthusiastic band, and we still love making music together.
Yeah.
And partly because we're like, yeah, we don't
Yeah.
do that shit. We we're we're,
Yeah.
we're we're looking for gems. We're mining for gems. We're not polishing
Mm.
turds that already existed. So
I love that. I mean, it would be so low hanging fruit to do another Drive because Drive was so massive. I mean, I remember like everybody I knew who was learning to play guitar or loved alternative music. I guess you'd call it rock at that time, but it's
yeah.
like they were all learning Drive on guitar, and it was a huge. It was just had a huge footprint on people, you know, of my generation of like, man, like there's so it would be so tempting to do another Drive, to do another acoustic
Yeah.
kind of, you know, catchy kind of thing. But you guys were like, no, we're going to do something totally different. And I think it paid off in a huge way. I mean, you know, even too, I noticed that with your record after that, you guys, A Crow Left of the Murder, like you guys went kind of to another places again. And, you know, and I kind of like what I loved about when I read more about the story of that record was that you guys are, I don't know if it was you guys or people you surrounded yourself with, but the business savvy of you guys was so inspiring because I think as artists, like people like you can get, you know, so taken advantage of who are super artistic and love to just, I don't know, just to create art and that you do it for the passion and for the love of it. But what I love about it is that with A Crow Left of the Murder, you guys went back and said, hey, like, we want to renegotiate. Like, we want to make our deal better. We need to be also participating in the lion's share of what's happening. And, you know, the way the music industry is going right now, it's just the artists aren't seeing as much of the income. And so, you know, my question to you was like, whose idea was that to do that? Like, have you guys always been business savvy, or did you just surround yourself with smart people?
I think that there's a little bit of both of that. I can't claim to be terribly business savvy, but I'm also I'm not entirely ignorant as to the goings on. Because from a certain perspective, it isn't rocket science, the business side of the record industry or any sort of entertainment industry for that matter, but it is loaded with really exotic legal language that is sort of meant to intimidate people from really understanding the elements of the deals that they sign. And that's why you hear story after story. In fact, it's more commonplace than not to hear horror stories about the kind of deal that people get.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why today we're an independent band. And it's there are some wonderful things about the music industry of the past and the present. I have to offer that caveat because we are a band that benefited mightily from that older record industry paradigm.
Yeah.
But it wasn't without some very hard fought battles in amongst all of that. So when things were going really, really well, we celebrated those triumphs with our record industry partners. But then there were moments when we could start to see some of the places where our record industry partners were starting to take advantage of us and started to take advantage of our kind of like glossy-eyed creative naivete. And we wanted to just protect ourselves. And there was a certain element of fairness that started to get kind of thrown out the window. So you are correct in assuming that we did surround ourselves with some very capable people in the form of manager or legal representation. But then we also made a point to educate ourselves from at least some modicum of education around what was happening. And we made some very key strategic decisions that allowed us to be both creative and perform, and in some instances, creatively finance what would potentially be like litigation. You know what I mean? And there were certain instances where we actually combined all of them together, and we ended up benefiting in certain respects as a result of being able to see like in 360 degrees. So to any sort of younger musicians out there, or you know, people on their way up, I think that it's you can get too lost in the kind of left brain analytical legal jargon around the record industry, and you could become too business savvy, and you can kind of lose sight of why you're there in the first place, which is to be creative and to make music and to make art. But then you can be too lost in the full right hemisphere part of creativity, and people
Yeah.
will just take advantage of you. So what makes sense is to kind of have an area where you know how to cross-pollinate both of those hemispheres and learn how to watch your own back, learn how to surround yourself with capable, trustworthy people so that you can spend most of your time in those creative spaces. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have to think that like the reason why you guys are still a band today and considered a legacy act of like, you know, of a high level is because you guys made a business decision like that where it allowed you to continue. And, you know, because it's not just like a selfish, I want more money. It's like a, if I
Mm,
don't, if I'm not fairly cut in, I'm not able to continue to do it what I love. And I think artists
yeah,
forget that, you know, and so you guys
yeah,
made that decision, and I'm sure it was hard, but you know, I'm thankful for it because then we got more music from you guys, which is awesome. So super cool.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for noticing. And I don't want to discourage, once again, younger musicians or people that are breaking into the industry from doing so, because there is so
Yeah.
much incredible experience. There's so much magic to be experienced in a life of making music.
Yeah.
But like um, any other walk of life, and really any walk of life, any trade you find yourself in, anything in any realm of experience, if you don't have uh, one ear to the tracks, so to speak, and and one eye up in the clouds, you're going to find yourself tripping up in certain places. And
Mm.
it's not as if we didn't make a handful of mistakes on our own, and sometimes
Yeah.
continue to. But I think that there are certain practices and behaviors that people can employ on a day-to-day basis that can help mitigate some of the just life's risks. Life is a
Yeah.
little bit like wandering through a garden where every once in a while there's a landmine. So
Yeah.
you can appreciate the garden, but if you don't have one eye on the floor, sometimes like you'll just step
Yeah.
on something that's going to blow up in front of you. So
Yeah. Then all the beauty's gone. That makes so much sense.
yeah,
I'll dive back into some more music for the fans. You know, when I listened to Megalomaniac, that was such a cool turn from Morning View. You know, it's like I love the return of like the harder, like more sciencey kind of rock thing. And
yeah.
you know, was it you know, this is kind of part of that song, but was it hard going through the controversy of people attaching it to a presidency and a political
Hmm.
thing? Was that hard even in that time before? I think that was probably before Twitter and before, you know,
Hmm.
a lot of this
Hmm.
social media craziness. Like, you know, were you expecting that reaction when you put this song out?
No, I was not, and I think that for the most part, like the people who were already aware of our band, which at that point was, a lot of people, which is so amazing.
Yeah.
I think that they just enjoyed the song. It was really the the reaction from a kind of politically reactionary point of view was definitely a smaller subset of people, but people were very quick to associate it with the Bush presidency, and probably in no small part because we made a music video with this amazing director, Floria Sigismondi, where it was pretty overtly attacking the Bush administration and his ties to big oil and that
Yeah.
kind of addictive consumption of that,
Yeah.
that whole idea. So, but we were still, I'm still a very idealistic person. And I was probably the same level of idealism then, but with a little less perspective.
Mm.
So I wouldn't change anything, but there definitely
Yeah.
was some blowback for sure. I remember like walking down the street once in Santa Monica when that single was kind of all over the place. And a few times like random people like chided me. They like criticized me on the street for
What?
having, yeah,
Wow.
so weird. And this is way before social media. I don't think it existed yet.
Yeah.
And these are just people's opinions about it. And it was almost like a how dare you criticize our leader kind of a thing. And
Jeez.
do you remember that period of time, like when after 9/11,
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
was for quite a few years where any kind of critique, and it's still here now, any
Yeah.
critique towards American leadership was considered un-American.
Yeah.
And that's still to me, it's like the weirdest concept to live in a country that exalts freedom of speech as much as we do, but then
Yeah.
be so quick to want to clamp down on any form of peaceful dissent.
Yeah.
So there were really only a handful of moments that were kind of strange like that. For the most part, it was a really positive experience.
Yeah, I can imagine in that time. I mean, it's even more so now with all the trolling on all these social media things, but the
Yeah.
blowback is real and the cancel culture is real, and it's very strange. It's a very strange time to be alive and to have opinions. To have any opinion is to have the chance of being canceled. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
it's not
Imagine
fun.
that.
Which kind of gets me into the next one, agoraphobia, the fear of going outside, the fear of being outside. It's like with all this craziness, happening, it's kind of crazy how relevant that song from that record from such a long time ago is so relevant now, with the pandemic and the rioting and everything else going on, there's probably a lot of people who are just staying inside and not even just staying inside in a physical way, but in a way of like not connecting with people and feeling fear of, I don't know, just everything. So like when you guys went and did this new version of Agoraphobia, like what kind of triggered that for y'all?
It was Mike and I were chatting about just recording some music, because both of us have very kind of humble recording setups at our respective homes, and we were musing about how there are kind of a good handful of Incubus songs that feel weirdly relevant right now, and they had relevance to us and hopefully to some people that listened to them when they first came out, whether it was in 1999 or whether it was in 2003, in this case, 2003, 2004 with Agoraphobia. But that song in particular spoke to the moment in a way that it was almost like comically relevant. It was like, this is so on the nose, it's almost weird. And then we went back and forth, was like, is that lame for us to kind of put that out again, put out a single from a record that's 17 years old? And then we kind of just, I think we both shrugged our shoulders and we were like, I don't fucking care. Let's do it. It's a cool song.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. So he sent me the acoustic guitar track that he recorded at his house, and then I recorded the vocal here at mine, and then I masked up and went up to his house with my camera, and I filmed him playing it, and then my girlfriend filmed me singing it here, and we kind of threw it together in the video that we put out. And yeah, it's interesting because the song was never encouraging a collective agoraphobia. It was more expressing, I suppose, a sentiment that we were feeling around that period of time in 2003, 2004, that has now reemerged, but in a much more dramatic way. I don't think that I have ever experienced a time in my lifetime thus far where there has been a kind of collective fear of literally going outside, expressing your opinion out of fear of being canceled, to your point before. It's so strange. It almost has rings of a sort of like a fictional dystopia that we've all been reading about and seeing movies about. And then all of a sudden you start to ask yourself, like, oh my God, were these movies just predicting the future, or is this art imitating life, or vice versa? It's such a strange time. We will be talking about, arguing about, and making movies about and writing books about this period of time that we are all living through right now for the next 100 years.
It's true. It's crazy to think about that. Like this is a huge moment in history. I mean, so many huge things are happening. Yeah, I was I watched the quarantine version of Our Love, the performance that you guys did with that too. Where are you? Where is that, like that ceiling that has the cool pattern? Like
oh yeah, it's a yurt. I have a yurt on my on my property here,
Oh
and
my gosh.
I live in the Santa Monica Mountains, so I have a little bit of space, which is amazing right now. I feel so
Cool.
blessed to have a little bit of space, but
Yeah.
it's a short walk from my house, and the yurt is it's like a tent, but a really nice tent, and it was originally invented in like outer Mongolia,
Crazy.
and they used to line them with furs and things, and they would insulate them with fur and skins, and then have a wood burning situation in the center of it. So mine's kind of like a modern version of that, but it's mostly where I paint.
That's cool. I didn't know you painted. That's awesome. Are you,
Yeah.
do you do a lot of art yourself? Like, do you have any plans to do any kind of stuff by yourself?
As far as visual art or audio art, what do you mean?
I guess all art, like, have you ever done a solo record? Like, is that something on your mind?
Yeah, I've actually done two solo records over the years. My first one came out in 2010. It's
Okay.
called The Wild Trapeze. And I really like the record because it's a very pure album. There's not a lot of studio trickery to it. I
Mm,
recorded it uh, alone with a friend and a producer named Dave Fridman, upstate New York in the woods in a converted Amish barn. And I played all the instruments on the record. So all the guitar, the drums, the bass. Dave is a more accomplished keyboard player than I am. So he did some of the more complex keys, but
yeah.
he mixed it and we put it out, and it's kind of a little bit more of like a cult success than anything, hence the reason you probably never heard of it, but it's worth
Yeah.
a listen. And then in 2013 or 14, one of those years, I did a record with our longtime Incubus producer, Brendan O'Brien. He and I did a record
That's awesome.
together, and we called it Sons of the Sea. And it's a completely different kind of album that I've ever made. It's like really weird psychedelic pop. Um, and so it has like sort of through lines with Incubus, but not intentionally. I think it's just because
Yeah.
I'm the singer and the lyricist, and it's probably
Yeah.
the most through line type of a thing. But it's also worth a listen because it's very musically dense, lyrically dense, and fun. It's a very fun album.
I've got to go
But
back and check those out. I'm an absolute doofus for not knowing about that. Everybody's like, "How did you not know?"
well,
They're
the thing
right
is
though. They're
too.
right.
Well, it's a I take zero offense to the fact you never heard of it, and part of me is kind of excited that you haven't heard them because you might really enjoy them, or you might hate them enough to curse even having talked to me today. You never know. Like that's kind of exciting. But yeah, they also, the most recent one, Sons of the Sea, uh, I put it out independently, and that allows me to keep a large level of control over it, which
Yeah.
creatively as an independent artist is really important to me. But it severely limits its reach because I don't have like the financial might of a big record label.
Yeah.
So most people haven't heard that record, and there's something that, it's like I'd love for lots of people to listen to everything that I do or that we do in Incubus. But there's something about records being like slow discoveries over periods of time that I'm almost accustomed to at this point. Incubus was never a band that was popular immediately.
Mm,
Our our progression and our both creatively and our career has been the slowest arc. It's been like it is the proverbial slow burn.
yeah.
It's the joint that like never goes out. You know what I mean? It just it
Yeah.
just it just keeps sort of climbing, plateaus, dips, climbs, plateaus, dips, and so I've come to understand that almost everything that I do and work on has that kind of effect. And so it's fun. Like people are still discovering Incubus. People are going to be discovering the things that we do collectively, but also individually for a long time, which is really exciting.
Yeah. It's absolutely a legacy of art. I'm like, when I think about how many records you guys have made, it's like it's not enough. Like it's so much I could never cover it all in 1 hour. So, which is so cool. Well, I was going to ask you two more quick questions before you go, and I always ask
Yeah.
these same ones. And you can give quick answers or long answers, whatever you're feeling. I know it's going to kick us off in 10 minutes, but I wanted to ask you if you could name one battle that's the hardest personal battle that you've been through and how you overcame it, what would you say that
Mm.
was?
Ooh, wow. I am no stranger to personal struggle or collective struggle for that matter. So I don't even know where I would begin. Excuse me. I suppose one of the things that have been the most challenging for me has been I had a kind of I had a very humbling experience about 10 years ago. Well, it began about 10 years ago, um, in that I started to, it's so long of a story. I'll just say that I had very severe health issues
Mm.
for a period of time. And it's not easy enough to state in like, I stubbed my toe real bad, then I lost my toe and it was hard. It's like, it's
Yeah.
not like that at all. It's this kind of long, protracted event that led to a great deal of physical pain in my body for what felt like an excruciating period of time. And the high level pain part lasted about 6 months. And every doctor in modern medicine on the West Coast felt like they were in the hospital with me and nobody could diagnose me. It was a very
Jeez.
strange, frightening thing. And so I went through a long period of having to accept certain things, and it was around mortality and certain ways things were going in my life and my relationship to, most notably, myself, but then also my relationship to the people that were closest to me in my life, so on and so on and so on. Like I said, it's kind of
Yeah.
a long-winded story. I will just say, though, that having emerged on the other side of that experience, um, gave me a kind of perspective that I still to this day cherish.
Mm.
And it made me want to make more music. It made me want to
Yeah.
make more art. It made me want to get even closer to the people closest to me in my life. It made me appreciate my experience in our band in a way that I never thought was possible. So, because there was a period of time, without getting too dramatic, where I wasn't certain if I was like dying because the pain was so intense for
Wow.
such a long period of time,
Wow.
that I had to kind of like, I had to reckon with certain things.
Mm.
And but in retrospect, it was a really beautiful experience because pain can be so uh, incredibly informative,
Yeah.
if and not just in your body's intelligence telling you where something is going wrong. Pain can inform some amazing kind of spiritual breakthroughs,
Yeah.
or almost like metaphysical breakthroughs in the way that you perceive the world. So that was the takeaway.
Oh, wow. I love that. I feel that for sure. That's pretty great. Um, and then the second question I always ask, which we've kind of covered some of it, but, as an artist and, in your career, what would you say is your biggest battle that you faced in your career and how did you overcome that?
Interesting. I honestly don't know how to answer that question in the same respect.
Yeah.
These are big questions you're asking, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate that you're asking them because uh, they're worthy of conversation, and they're worth digging into. But the biggest battle I faced in my career, um, I suppose, once again, that in our career there's any number of seemingly insurmountable mountains that we have surmounted. We've climbed to the top of
Yeah.
and gotten incredible views once we were up there. But I think one of the things that's been the most challenging has been, uh, once again, a kind of a battle of self and of self-perception, and being able to battle one's own personal demons, whether they are psychological or chemical
Mm.
or egoically based, or any number of those things.
Yeah.
And so in my own career, I think that keeping my ego in check.
Mm.
And I've made that kind of a something of high priority,
Yeah.
where I've chosen to continually humble myself and reach out towards kinds of information, kinds of literature, and kinds of teachers that helped me keep one's, or in this case, my egoic experience of being in my position in keeping it grounded. And so I've been fascinated with learning about the idea of ego and its evolved capacity and where it comes from, what it is, how I am not identical to it, not associating too much with it. And it's no small feat being the singer in a big stinky rock band to try and keep your own ego in check.
Yeah.
Because we can, and it's happened to the best of us, you know, we can so easily get kind of swept up in the intoxicating roar of the crowd and think like, I must be amazing. They're all cheering for me, you know, but there's so much toxic danger in that, in resting in that place. So what I've been learning to do, and it's a process, you know, what I've been learning to do over the years is to enjoy those moments when they're there, but then kind of see them for what they are, to step into the role when it's the time and place to do so, and then step back from it when it's time to do so, because you can't walk from the stage in front of 20,000 people into line at your local coffee shop and expect the same treatment. You know, it just doesn't work. And if the things that we're doing, whether they're creative or in any walk of life, if they don't lead to a bigger, more enriched understanding of our lives, then they're kind of for naught. You know what I mean? So it almost doesn't matter what you do, whether you're the president, or whether you're a big rock star or a big actor, or you're a woodworker, or you're a gardener. It's like any walk of life. It's like if they're not helping to enrich our understanding of our place in the world, then they're kind of it's just masturbatory, and it's like you're wasting your time, you know? Does that make sense?
Man, I love that. I love that. I love hearing that from you too. It's cool to talk to you at a place that you're at, where you've had so many years of doing what you love and what you're passionate about in the way that you've done it, you know, and still kind of maintain that headspace is a beautiful thing, man. I like, props to you. And I'm sure you've had to do a lot of soul searching and digging to find the gold that you're pulling out right now. So I appreciate you sharing that wisdom with all of us, because even for me, kind of, you know, getting started and all this stuff, I love hearing that, because it is a battle to fight your ego. And, you know, if you're not learning on your way through all this, you're going to turn into a monster, and that's not what we want. So
that's so true. And thank you for summing it up like that, because that is really the core message of what I was trying to say. I can kind of drift off into the clouds sometimes, but you summed it up quite nicely. Thank you.
You have a way with words, man. I am definitely a huge fan of what you do, and I'm excited to hear more music, whether it's from Incubus or yourself. I'm stoked. I'm going to go back and listen to everything I haven't heard. I love all you people down here giving me grief, because that just means the passion and the love for you is real. So I love it. It's amazing. But Brandon, thank you so much, man, for being on here with me and taking time on a Saturday to do this. This is awesome.
It's my pleasure. Thank you too. Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, good to meet you. All right.
I'll see you around.
See ya.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.